I'm sure you've all heard the expression, "the moon is made of cheese." Understandable, because the moon does look a bit like a big round cheese, but in fact the correct expression is, "the moon is made of green cheese," and the first written record of it comes from John Haywood in the 16th century as part of a collection of old sayings. But of course the moon isn't green, so where does this idea come from? Is it possible the original saying, going back centuries before Haywood, was that the moon is made of cream cheese, and ancient beliefs are often based on a kernel of truth? Cream cheese is a carbon-based compound made of elements that are commonly found throughout the universe. This is what it looks like under a microscope. So is it possible that a similar compound does exist on the moon? We know that cheese is formed when proteins break down into peptides and then amino acids, and finally into carboxylic acids through a process called lipolysis. Now you might think, surely you can't get proteins on the moon, they recomplex organic chemicals. Yes, they are, but amino acids are not, and we know that amino acids are present on the moon because they've been found in meteorites. So there's no reason why the same chemical process that turns amino acids into carboxylic acids on Earth could happen on the moon. But is there any evidence for it? When Apollo astronauts came back from the moon, NASA announced that the samples they brought with them were volcanic rock, and they said maybe we could mine the moon for valuable minerals. And because everyone trusts NASA, no one questioned it. But I'd urge you to check for yourselves. This is what moon rock looks like under a microscope. NASA claims it's volcanic, but here's rock from the Earth that we know is volcanic, and it looks nothing like the supposedly volcanic rock they found on the moon. So what does it look like? Well, let's go back to that microscopic image of cream cheese that we saw earlier. Notice any similarity. But why, you might ask, would NASA want to fake all this? Well, just follow the money. Here's NASA's budget as a percentage of the federal budget over the last 60 years. You'd have to be blind not to see that their most profitable years were when they were sending rockets to the moon. As long as they can keep up the pretense that there are valuable minerals there, they can ask for billions of dollars in funding. But the movement to expose NASA's fraud is growing. There's currently a debate over this issue in the scientific community, so you need to keep an open mind and listen to both sides of the argument. So you need to current identity to you do you oh oh do There was a huge controversy earlier this year when a peer-reviewed paper was published providing more evidence that the moon is made of cheese. The reason you haven't heard about this is because as soon as the paper was published, the author was fired from his job stacking boxes at a Walmart superstore, ostensibly because he forgot to refrigerate a carton of blueberry swirl ice cream. But the real reason is that he dared to go against the scientific consensus. Not only that, everyone who read the paper mysteriously disappeared or ended up dead in a dumpster. The only conclusion we can draw now. I apologize for that rant by my evil twin brother, but he was going a bit too far with this conspiracy. Just in case anyone was beginning to doubt it, the moon isn't made of cheese, but I suppose some people will already be sufficiently convinced that they'll just assume a part of the conspiracy to cover that up. After all, people are prepared to believe videos that claim the Earth is expanding. If I'd made up something mildly less absurd, like the moon is going to crash into the Earth, it would be very easy to dazzle gullible people with lots of numbers and diagrams and convince them of anything. Don't just take me word for it yourselves. Think up the most outlandish conspiracy you can, in other words, a conspiracy of scientists to fake data to cover up what you think is the truth, and build on it. Don't just make stuff up out of thin air. Do what real conspiracy theorists do, make it plausible. Cherry pick some real facts, just make sure you draw the wrong conclusions. It's surprisingly easy and actually quite fun. Actually, as a serious So in this video I'm going to look at why people trust blogs and videos like these more than science textbooks. Of course, there are psychology papers that have studied the problem in depth, but their conclusions are not rocket science. There's a pretty obvious pattern in why people are drawn into believing junk science videos and blogs. The trick is to shame them into thinking they're closed-minded and stupid if they just follow what they retaught by the government, i.e. science teachers, but smart and enlightened if they believe in a conspiracy that few people know about. You may have failed science at school, but now you re somebody. You re on equal terms with a Harvard professor. And use certain buzzwords that have seen come up time and time again in discussions with conspiracy theorists on me channel. One of the most popular mantras is do your own research, which of course doesn't mean pick up a textbook and learn about the subject. It means Google blogs that are easy to understand and echo your newfound beliefs, and blogs that are dressed up to look like peer-reviewed scientific papers. Oh yes, that paper. Well, the Journal of Eclectic Science is a journal my evil twin brother made up. All it takes is a build-your-own webpage app. The journal also contains cutting-edge research into spoon bending, and there's a paper showing that Elvis is alive. If you think that starting your own scientific journal to promote your beliefs is a bit far-fetched, well, it's already been done. This impressive-looking journal was started by two Irish brothers who submitted their own papers to themselves, peer-reviewed their own papers, approved them without changes, and published them on their own blog, which they called Open Peer Review Journal. Now you might think, who in their right mind would fall for something like that? Well, people do, and they reciting it. When I floated the idea that the internet might be seriously undermining real science back in 2011, I said this. When Cliff Clavin expounded his knowledge in the barroom at Cheers, he had an audience of less than a dozen people. These days, Cliffy would undoubtedly have his own website, and to disguise the fact that it's written by a mailman, he can make it anonymous, or he can give himself any title he likes and claim a specialist background he doesn't have. That was 8 years ago. In fact, He first mooted the idea more than 5 years earlier than that, at a time when people still knew Clavin was. But back then, I still found it hard to believe that a useful tool like this newfangled internet could be responsible for undermining 200 years of published science. Surely, I thought, normal, intelligent people wouldn't fall for this. We'd never have, say, a president of the United States gullible enough to believe whatever he sees on the internet. Look, it doesn't matter if this was a Republican or a Democratic president. We should all be concerned if our leaders are this easily missiled. It's ironic that we now have a world of information at our fingertips. People can check any fact, from the mass of Jupiter to the chemical constituents of asparagus, without having to hunt through their local library. And yet the result has not been an increase in public knowledge, but a dumbing down. What are people learning? That evolution never happened. That putting crystals on your body draws out negative energy. And yes, this really is a growing belief that the Earth is flat. In April 2018, a YouGov poll found that 7 of Americans now think the Earth is or may be flat. That's 23 million people in one of the best educated countries in the world. It's not often I agree with creationist Ray Comfort. In fact, I don't think I ever have. But he did manage to get this one right. If you're a Christian and you believe that the Earth is flat, please keep it to yourself. Even if you have Bible verses that you think prove it, verses that are obviously metaphoric. This is because in many people's minds, you will be perceived intellectually on the level of someone who thinks the moon is made of cheese. If they know you, a Christian, insisting that the Earth is flat won't exactly help your credibility. Yeah, I wouldn't want to make ourselves look stupid, right? Behold, the atheist's nightmare. But it's not Christians Ray has to worry about. Most of them have no problem with science. It's his fellow fundamentalists. According to the same YouGov poll, the more religious you are, the more likely you are to believe that the Earth is flat. That's not surprising, because people who are inclined to see a conspiracy in one field of science tend to believe in conspiracies everywhere. Tony Heller, whose blog is full of climate conspiracies, also gives vent to the idea that the Sandy Hook school massacre might have been a conspiracy, as well as the conspiracy theory that Obama was born in Kenya. The guy who made this video about a flat Earth also thinks NASA faked the moon landings. Once you start believing everyone's conspiring to hoax you, that means everyone's conspiring to hoax you. The fact is that all these conspiracy theories use exactly the same modus operandi. Cherry-pick, misrepresent, misquote, and invent a fictitious motive for the conspiracy, which is why it'll be so easy for you to build your own if you want to try it. The reason for this growing trend in conspiracies is best illustrated by the YouGov survey on flat Earth belief. The younger you are, the more likely you are to believe in a flat Earth. 94 of people over 55 accept that the Earth is round. Only 66 of millennials do. And where do millennials get their information? No prizes for guessing. No boys, or you say. Don't just take me word for it. Look it up yourself. There it is again. Do your own research. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if you want to look up how the ancient Greeks worked out that the Earth was round over 2,000 years ago and how it's been confirmed by every branch of physics. How the over the view But of course these videos are aimed at people who aren't that much into science. They are not going to bother with textbooks and educational websites that contain complicated things like numbers. They all Google sites like this. After all, 5 of respondents say they used to believe the earth was round, then as recommended they did their own research and came to the conclusion that there's some merit to the belief that the earth is flat. So it's pretty obvious where they did their research. Google searches may not convince them that the earth is flat, but it exposes them to enough bullcrap to sow a seed of doubt. That's all junk science needs. Once you believe scientists might be faking everything, you will move quickly on to why, and that leads to the argument that they redoing it to get more research grant money. Why else? So let's see how this conspiracy works. In me geology class, there was only one high achiever who went on to do aft. This isn't her, by the way. The rest of us were just humdrum geology graduates who took up well-paid jobs in the oil industry because the intellectual demands aren't that great and the money is good. Most of me classmates went on to senior management roles in the oil industry where the pay got even better. Helen, the one who did theft, could have easily landed a similar job because she was the smart one. But she wasn't interested in an industry job. She was motivated by a burning interest in geology and a desire to make new discoveries and further the limits of scientific knowledge. Don't be surprised, some people are just like that. The obsessive inquisitive nature of researchers is how science has advanced for the last 500 years. In the years after graduation, Helen never mentioned that she'd been initiated into this secret worldwide conspiracy, but here's how it must have gone. After Helen successfully applied for a grant to study carboniferous ocean environments, her tutor would have broken the news to her. Sorry, Helen, but if you're going to find any evidence that's going to overturn accepted science, in other words, everything that's already been published, you're not allowed to publish that. You have to fake the data to cover it up, but there will be money in it for you. Let's just imagine Helen didn't tell the tutor that this was an outrageous request, but she's curious as to how anyone can profit from such a duplicitous scam. Paddling, Passive, Passive, Where's 76, Where's this? Where's the Where's the nuisance? What we said this is. Why would we say the waves? Was it the 77? What was this? It is the same as the beauty seals every desire of this out of this. Well, lose it? Why would we say this of views? Why would this of this of views of the waves? What would you do to the sentence of the TV? Have a then exists. Was it? Why we said this of the as of this and the least services. Both of you we've said so. Both of you have said this and then view this and this and view sense. We will live in this and you. Well,